Welcome. I'm Leslie Canham.
I'm Mary Gavoni.
I'm Linda Harvey.
I'm Olivia Wan, and together we are the Compliance Divas.
Welcome to this episode of the Compliance Divas podcast. My name is Linda Harvey, and I will serve as your moderator today. We bring clarity and simplicity to compliance by navigating the regulatory world to keep you on course. Please subscribe to the Compliance Divas podcast through your favorite podcast channel or on our website, thecompliancedivas.com. Any resources that we mentioned during today's podcast can also be found on our website, as well as the show notes for this episode. And we invite you to submit questions to support@thecompliancedivas.com. Today, our topic of conversation is water, and specifically the quality of water that flows through your dental unit water lines and is used during patient care. Understanding how to maintain the quality of the water in your water lines can sometimes be confusing at best. So what products to use, understanding the difference between simply maintaining versus shocking the water, how to troubleshoot a failed water line test. Those are all things that give us puzzles and create conundrums in our daily life. Interestingly, water covers 2/3 of the Earth's surface and is a mere 0.08. That's 0.08% that is usable as is, and the rest needs some type of cleaning or desalination. So in thinking about your water lines, today we're very happy to have Mike Rust with ProEdge Dental join the Divas. ProEdge is well known in the dental industry for its dental unit waterline products, as well as testing. And I'm thrilled that Mike is the regional sales manager at ProEdge Dental, and he has over 11 years experience at ProEdge, helping dental practices maintain safe dental unit water lines. So Mike knows water. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you all for having me. It's an honor to be here with all of you.
Well, we are excited to have you. So with that, let's jump into our conversation. Mary, would you jump us off and can you talk about what's going on with testing?
Absolutely. And Mike, I want to reiterate how excited we are to have you with us. We have all known you for a long time, and we respect that you help to support us and help to make dentistry safer. So thank you for all you do. I see two issues when I'm either lecturing or working with clients. One is a group of folks that have no clue that they are supposed to be testing their water, and they're not understanding that, yes, maybe their water line cleaner disinfectant is working, but how well, and is it really working? And then the other is those that are testing are easily confused about how to do it and what, it's just some sort of troubleshooting things that if they have a failure. So help us out with these two issues.
You're asking, why is it so hard to pass a water test and get safe water? Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's harder than than so many other things that we do in the infection control, that all your clients and the lecture attendees, are so good at doing. And I think the reason is as Linda mentioned, biofilm has been around for billions of years, and it's way better at reproducing than we are at stopping that reproduction without killing the fish downstream or the equipment in our operatory, right? So you've got to use a nasty chemical really to clean, disinfect the water lines. The bugs that grow in dental unit water lines are really similar to the soap scum that grows in our showers. And we take what do you use to clean your showers? Right? A pretty nasty chemical. It takes a pretty nasty chemical. So like bleach, for example, right? That's a pretty effective way to do it, but and you have to do it regularly. And still the biofilm is better at coming back than we are at keeping it from coming back. So I think that's the short answer is that it takes constant maintenance, right? You need to shock. If you want safe water, you got to learn how to shock your water lines effectively. And then you got to shock often enough. You got to shock depending on your protocol, either every week or every month or every several months. You can, and if you use a tablet or a straw, most of the people out there like the tablets. More people are liking the straws or the cartridges because they're lower maintenance. But those things just buy you time between shocks, right? They either buy you weeks or months, but not years between shocks. You still have to shock more often than you might think because that biofilm is so good at reproducing. A biofilm's job is to go forth and multiply. It builds a polysaccharide layer, which is hard to remove. And that's what takes the nasty chemical. And then you use a low-level antimicrobial that is safe to ingest, and that can keep the bugs from coming back for weeks or for months, but not for much longer than that. And so, you know, that's it. That's it. I wish there was a piece of equipment. If I was a dentist, I would just say, oh, come on, I'll spend $3,000 to buy a piece of equipment so I don't have to shock every quarter and, you know, and I'll do all that and use the tablet every day or put the straw in. I just want a piece of equipment that solves the problem. I just want to buy a product. Well, there isn't one. It takes a procedure. It takes a protocol. It takes training. It takes the divas. It takes you guys training your customers and reminding them that biofilm is going to be there tomorrow morning. It's growing just like the dandelions in your front yard. It's growing. You got to do the maintenance on it. I hope that answers your question, Mary.
Biofilm rules is basically what you're telling us, and we need to knock it off its little throne.
It's true, but the dandelion analogy is pretty good. You know, when you use a tablet or a straw, you're mowing the lawn, right? You got to shock, and that means you got to fertilize. You know, you got to use a nasty chemical to knock it down, and it's still coming back. So yes, that's a good analogy. That's a great question, Mary, too. And it is, I think it's the question that we get most. Well, people call us all day, every day, and they just say, can you help me get past my water test? We have a team of people that do nothing but help people pass the water test with whatever product they're using. It's a giant customer service team, and they're busy all day, every day. People struggle. People do struggle. It's a struggle. We wish it was easier. And we wish there was a magic bullet, but there isn't.
So Mike, I love two things in particular that you and Mary just talked about when you said one important key is consistency and consistently and keeping up with the shocking. And I love that whole biofilm mission, go forth and multiply. That really says it so succinctly, very much. So circling to your comment on consistency with taking care of your dental unit Waterlines, Olivia has a question for you about what trends you are seeing with that regards to statewide, nationwide.
Mike, it's so nice to have you on our show. Thank you. So what you see at ProEdge with your team, are there any trends that you all are noting in regards to states that are more compliant than others and states that are doing a better job with testing?
Yeah, we have a lot of data. We have about 500,000 water test data points from the last couple of years that we collect anonymously and blindly for a question, just because people like you, smart people like you, ask questions like that. And it's fun to know which states are doing better. Obviously, the state of Washington has a law, right? It's a statute that says a dentist shall test every water line every 90 days. And kind of goes back to what Mary was asking about. Even in Washington state, the level of compliance is much higher, but it ain't 100% yet, you know? So, you know, by and large, most of our customers and clients do the right thing for the right reasons. They want to protect their patients. They want to protect their staff. And when they do all this stuff with their dental water lines and they document it, now they're protecting their practice, their reputation, their business, you know, and their exit strategy. So most people want to do it for the right reasons, but there are laggards and there are early adapters. And I would say the state of Michigan was an early adapter, Oregon for some reason. It's kind of funny, the two states where the infections happened, California and Georgia, are not on the top end of compliance. There's a lot of customers and clients in those states, and legislation can help, but there's no substitute for awareness, right? And that's what you guys do all day, every day, is create and remind people of the need to stay vigilant in this category. And there are there's geographic trends, Olivia, but there's also different types of clinics that do a much better job. Yeah, obviously, community health clinics have a lot of rules they got to follow if they want to keep getting reimbursed to see those underserved patients. And one of those rules is often to test the water lines. Often they're Joint Commission accredited, and they just have a lot of rules to follow, and they're very good at it. And they're mission driven, right? The more so than they're profit driven. And they're the first to test quarterly, to test their water lines quarterly. Some of them set their own standards to do so. Some of them just started reading the manufacturer's instructions for use. What a concept. They actually read the manufacturer's instructions for use. And they test quarterly because almost every equipment manufacturer has changed their instructions for use in the last 3 years since the inspections and the infections and the lawsuits. Most manufacturers have changed their instructions for use, and they now say, doctor, it's on you to test your water every 90 days and prove that it's safe. And but go ahead, Olivia.
Yeah, Mike, I'm also curious. You mentioned that some of the clinics have a better testing rate, but what about the specialties compared to general practices? Do you see a better rate of compliance among specialty dentists, such as periodontists or other specialties, rather than general practices?
The short answer is no. We don't see any particular specialty being extraordinarily better or worse than anyone else. I think it goes like this: community health clinics and governments, right? Government clinics pass at 95%, which means they never fail, right? With staff turnover to get to 95%, that's as good as it's ever going to get. That's like going undefeated from your favorite sports team. That's like your favorite sports team going undefeated. It's absolutely amazing that you can get 95% is unbelievably good. It's perfect. And both community health clinics and government clinics both are right there, right? And then the average dentist is in the 70s, right? The average customer is in the 70s. Olivia, we think that oral surgeons and periodontists, you think they'd have a higher level of awareness, and they do for surgical procedures. Hopefully they use sterile water for surgery, which is right a completely different part of this conversation. we know that they don't always do that, but that's awareness too. As soon as they remember that that's part of this guidance is to use sterile water from a sterile source for surgical procedures, they do a better job. But that's a great question, Olivia. And for the record, that could be an article. If you guys want to, if anyone's interested in writing an article, we'll provide the data, and you can dive into it yourself. And oh, Linda's putting her thumb up. It's true. That it'd be fun to know. We're not trying to pick on anybody, but I think I like the encouraging message that that customers who test quarterly, regardless of their specialty, clients and doctors' offices who test quarterly just don't fail. That's where the quarterly came from. You guys know Shannon Mills had something to do with that, and John Molinari spoke to the Washington State Dental Board to help them write the legislation. And they listened to him, and there's nothing magic about it every 90 days. It is something that makes sense to us. That's what Shannon always says, is that quarterly interval is something we can wrap our heads around, and if we test quarterly, that kind of makes sense. But the data shows that people who test quarterly don't fail. If you don't test quarterly, you fail 6 times more often. That's not me saying that. That's Molinari and Nancy Dewhurst's article that was published. That's the most comprehensive study that's ever been published in Compendium a couple years ago. That's pretty crazy, right? That's kind of worth doing, because if you test once a year and fail, you're going to wonder, I wonder how long my water hasn't been great. So if you test quarterly, it develops a culture of safety for this part of it. Most dental offices are so good. They have a culture of safety for everything except water. And that's why I say it's kind of it's a more recent development, I think.
So Mike, I'm just to jump in for a second. When you think a couple of points that you made, one, I'm gonna start with the last one and go backwards, is that culture of safety. Those three words are newer to us in dentistry than almost anything else. And those three words have been core principles of our medical counterparts for years. And now we're just focusing on culture of safety in dental practices. I mean, we've always been safety conscious, don't get me wrong, making sure there's been annual training or there's an OSHA manual or you've got PPE, just, those basic pieces. But to really focus on what does that mean? And so going back to another item that you mentioned was that why don't we see more testing, in states like Georgia where they had, the laws, the lawsuits from the failed water test and the disease that was transmitted to those pediatric patients. And I just find that interesting because on many websites, a dental practice will say that they follow the highest OSHA, CDC, or ADA guidelines. And if they're not following something as simple as waterline testing to make sure that their water is safe for their patients, particularly in today's arena where many more patients are taking more medications, there's a lot of immunocompromised patients with all different types of autoimmune disorders and all kinds of things. We're really not walking our walk. We're really not walking our walk. So I think that's caused me to think about that. So go ahead, Mike.
No, it's a huge point. You guys have been preaching safety and culture of safety for a long time, and you're still needed more than ever. The industry needs you more than ever. But yeah, that's a very good point. Olivia, did I answer your question? Do you have any follow-up or any other thoughts on that?
I mean, that's interesting. And it is concerning when we do site audits and we're not seeing sterile water and we're not seeing water testing and we're not seeing consistency in water treatment. And unfortunately, despite preaching this message for many, many years, it's probably one of the most neglected areas. And even if they're using the straws, they're not really following the instructions for use as indicated by the manufacturer. So it's a huge concern of ours, and hopefully this will continue to improve. But you've given us some interesting statistics that I've written down that I think would be of interest to the clients we serve. So thank you, Mike.
Well, and it dawns on me that I didn't answer your question about pediatric dentists in particular. You'd think there would be more awareness there. And where there is awareness, they do well. But there's still education that needs to be done, right? If a dental office is doing a lot of pulpotomies, right, and usually those are right there. That's a low income, so often mission driven, but often profit driven, corporate dentistry kind of a model. But that's a more invasive procedure. It's not specified. Leslie, you can jump in here, but it's not a surgical procedure, but it's darn close, and you better be at least using safe water. I think it'd be great if you use sterile water for any procedure that. And California has some rules about any procedures that can or may expose pulp, right? So they're trying to create awareness about the potential to infect patients, a healthy patient, not just the immunocompromised patients that we're discussing, the ones that we've always been worried about since the last pandemic, right? What water has taught us in the last 5 years is that dental unit water is now a risk to the general population. Leslie, help me out here.
Sure. Well, sometimes there's confusion from dental teams. They think that if they're treating their dental unit water, that it makes it safe for using during surgical procedures. And of course, when we're talking about sterile water or sterile saline, that those types of medicaments that are used on exposed dental pulp or invasive, normally sterile parts of the body needs to be something different than handpiece water or Aaron water syringe water. So like an incision, excision, reflection of tissue, periosurgery, apical surgery, implant surgery, those all require something at a higher level. And sometimes dental teams think using something like a straw or the tablets in their dental unit water make the water as safe as it can be. And that's for routine procedures. So is treating dental unit water enough? No. everyone should know what the quality of their water is. And in California, there's a specific regulation that went into effect on January 1st of 2019 that says when performing procedures on exposed dental pulp, water or other methods used for irrigation shall be sterile or contain recognized disinfecting or antibacterial properties. So that is part of what we are doing in California. We're also working on a regulation for infection control, but that has that's sort of fallen by the wayside because COVID helped slow things down a little bit, but it's still in the regulatory process. And at that point, when it does pass, we will have a requirement for testing our dental unit water on a regular basis.
Regular dental water line testing coming soon to a state near you.
I love those headlines, Mike. That's fabulous. We're
Well,
going to
maybe-
be quoting you for a while, you know.
Take out the word soon. Coming to a state near you. Maybe not so soon, but yeah.
Well, it's Halloween, so anything could be coming soon, right? Leslie, I think you wanted to ask Mike some questions about water testing and what our listeners can do maybe to save money. How much does it cost? And because this is a concern, we know a lot of the with the inflation and a lot of prices of our supplies going up. How does the dental practice work through that?
But, one of the things I wanted to ask Mike about water testing is how expensive it might be. How can we relate to our listeners what would be reasonable to spend, let's say on an annual basis, for testing your dental unit water? And just a little bit before we get to that, I noticed that a lot of dental practices are not testing their water. And I think part of it is they were worried about the expense or the extra time it would take. And I think partially it's like they don't want to know. It's like, I don't want to get on the scale sometimes because I don't want to know what it's going to say, but I know I should. I know it's important for my health. And I just see the same mindset when it comes to exploring dental unit water testing. Help me explain to everyone, our listeners, my clients, why it's important to water test.
Holy cow, that's a great analogy, Leslie. We use that internally all the time. That is, do you want to go on a diet before you get on the scale, or do you want to get on the scale before you go on the diet, right? So and it's absolutely true. So the history of ProEdge is we would go to a dental show and a dentist would come and say, "What do you guys do?" "We test water." They go, "Oh, cool. I want to know if my water is safe. How much does it cost?" We say, "It's about $20 for each test plus shipping." And they go, "Yeah, good luck with that. See you later." But it's nobody bought it. That's too expensive. And I get that. It's a product that doesn't put any money into their pocket. It takes money out of their pocket. All it does is give them the peace of mind to know that their water is safe, their patients are safe, their staff is safe. And when they document that their water is safe, now their practice is safe, their reputation is safe, their exit strategy is safe. If someday they want to sell that practice, this is part of the due diligence. I think all of you are aware of dental offices that are being acquired, and they want to know, they don't want to buy a practice that isn't buttoned up on all things infection control. So, but the way to save money, Leslie, there is one way to save money that goes against your instincts, I think. It's kind of interesting. So it's $20. Pretty much all the water tests out there are roughly $20. You can get them on sale for a little bit less than that. If you ship it to a lab like ours, FedEx is involved, and so there's the cost of shipping it overnight. It's got to be on ice and cold, so it's accurate when we get it the next day. But what you can do is not buy a water test vial for every single line in your office. You can buy one for every dental unit or every operatory and do a combined sample from all of the devices in that operatory. Let's say Op 1 is a treatment room, and it's got 2 air water syringes, doctor side and assistant side. It's got 2 high-speed handpiece lines, doctor side, assistant side. May have a slow-speed line in there that may or may not have water in it. But you can put all of those, as long as you put equal amounts of water from multiple devices into a single vial, and that test proves that all of those lines are safe. And you might think there's something weird, that doesn't sound right, but Shannon Mills and the guys from the University of Colorado that did some of this testing, smarter guys than me, have done this math on this, and it's just a false positive, false negative is unlikely. It's possible, but it's unlikely. So Well, that's a great way to save money. So if you follow what I'm saying here, you can put, let's say there's 4 devices in one operatory. You can put all 4 of those devices, as long as the samples are of equal size. A pass means all 4 lines are safe. If you fail, you don't know which line caused the failure, and you're going to go remediate at each line. And then you might want to test each line individually to find out which one is the troublemaker, which one's the hardest. But the science bears it out that that either you're, by and large, either you're winning or you're losing. The 2 most common numbers amongst we have, like I say, 500,000 data points in the last few years, is for water test results is 0 and too numerous to count. Either most dental offices, most dental water samples that we get are either winning, it's either a shutout, it's 0. The bugs either have 0 or they have too numerous to count. Only 3% of the time do our results come between 200 CFUs and 500 CFUs. And you all know that 500 CFUs per milliliter of water is the pass-fail threshold, right? So it's rarely near there. That means it's unlikely that you're going to get a false positive or a false negative. In other words, if one line is bad, but you're winning in all the other 3 lines in OP1, it's not that one line is not going to be so bad to cause a failure. And if it is, you want to shock them all anyway, so it's good. And the opposite is true. If you've got a couple lines that are failing and a couple lines that are passing, you're going to fail, or you're going to be close enough. And you may even know this, but we like many of our clients, if there's over 200 colony forming units per milliliter of water, they're still passing. But there's bugs in there. You want to shock them all. And you don't need to retest. Even ADEC has this guidance. If it's over 200, shock. If it's over 500, shock and retest. If it's over 10,000, shock twice and retest. And if it's over 100,000, shock 3 nights in a row with a EPA-approved shock product or protocol. So it's a great question, Leslie, and you're absolutely right. It is the single biggest reason why people aren't in compliance in this category. It's because it's expensive. It feels expensive. Once you do it, it's not so bad. And you can buy, you can do it yourself in an in-office test. You can buy these when they're on sale and get them down to like $10. $10, do it yourself. You know, at $10, that's, well, let me just cite the article written by Mary Gavoni. I've been citing this article for hundreds of times over the last couple decades, but she did a great article that's been cited many times on the cost of infection control per patient. Cost per patient, right? Decades ago, it was $9, then it was $11, and that was before $20 gloves from COVID, right? Now, right? So we're spending $20 per patient for everything else. Add about 10 cents to test your water and sleep good at night, knowing that you're there now. Now you're there. Your water is safe as well as everything else.
Wow, it's all about sleeping good at night, Mike, and that is so very important. Mike, this has been a fantastic topic to discuss today with you. There's so much information to learn and be reminded of as technology is impacting how we manage our dental unit water lines and the quality of the water that we're using to treat patients in that safe and trusted environment. So what I'd like to do and wrap up, let's test the divas. So I'm going to ask each diva to give us a takeaway for our listeners from your conversation with Mike. And Mary, let's start with you.
My best takeaway is the statistics that you gave us, Mike, about the pass and fail, that, you know, you're either at 0 or you're too numerous to count. I think that's really very interesting to know that those that shock regularly, those that test regularly fall into that category, and then other people, the other end of the scale is the too numerous to count. It's kind of like what I would say, close the office down for a few days because you shouldn't be treating patients.
Olivia, let's put you on tap next. What's your takeaway from today? Thank you, Mary. That's a very good takeaway.
I love Mike's statistics where he mentioned community clinics pass at 95%, whereas average dentist is in the 70s. And Mike, my takeaway is that means that 3 out of 10 practices are not in compliance. They risk hurting a patient. They risk being sued. And we have a lot of work to do as the divas. So thank you for sharing those statistics.
Thank you, Olivia. I think we'll all be using those statistics.
And just to augment that just slightly, but
Uh-huh.
if you have a dental practice with 10 operatories, it's 3 out of 10 operatories too. It's not just what a practice isn't perfect, even if it's perfect, right? So
Good thought. Good thought. Leslie, what's your takeaway tip for our listeners today?
Well, first of all, I believe that Mike solidified that we are not going to be spending a lot of money if we're testing our water ahead of time so we know where we are. He gave us some tips on how to pool our water testing into one vial if we have equal amounts from one dental operatory. And if we find that we have reasonable results there, then our unit is good. If we found that we had overcolonization of bacteria, then we need to maybe test each line. Also, he talked a little bit about the Anaheim case, and I remember the Anaheim case, the primary attorney for the children had mentioned several times that a reasonable and responsible dentist will follow the CDC guidelines for infection control. And that came up so many times during at least the deposition that I was involved with as an expert witness on that case. So again, the CDC guidelines state that dental unit water that remains untreated or unfiltered is unlikely to meet drinking water standards. Today, we've had a lot of information on the news about about all water, drinking water that is not safe. Why wouldn't a reasonable and responsible dentist test their dental unit water?
And I'll say amen to that, Leslie.
amen to that.
So as we wrap up then, thank you for joining us, Mike. This is the Compliance Divas, our podcast. My name is Linda Harvey. I've had the pleasure of serving as your moderator today. We bring clarity and simplicity to compliance by navigating the regulatory world to keep you on track. Please subscribe to our podcast through your favorite podcast channel or on our website, thecompliancedivas.com. Any resources that we mentioned today, particularly for all the ProEdge information that Mike has given us, will be on our website as well as in the show notes from today. So tune into our compliancedivas.com website. And then also, we always welcome your questions. They can be submitted to support@thecompliancedivas.com. And we look forward to seeing you at the next episode.